Hey guys, wow, the sun hasn't even cracked the horizon when you hear it. A low thrum, almost like thunder, except it's getting louder. You blink through the steam rising from your coffee and step out onto the dry earth. That's not weather, it's a helicopter. Maybe two. No one told you anything was coming. Not your supervisor, not the foreman, not the guys who drove in at 4 a.m. to get the irrigation going. You look around. Others step out of trailers in tank tops and work boots, shielding their eyes. Some still have toothbrushes hanging from their mouths. Then the trucks roll in, white unmarked except for a badge you recognize instantly, ICE. 4 agents to a vehicle, armed and armored like a war zone. No warrant, no warning, no knock, no interpreter. They fan out like they're in a war movie, except this isn't Fallujah. This is Fresno, a farm camp. Rows of strawberry patches waiting for hands that never get to reach them. You feel the adrenaline slam your chest as they yell names. No one here knows how to answer. One woman screams. Someone drops a crate of green onions, and it splatters like blood on the dirt. Children peek through rusted trailer blinds. They'll remember this sound more than any lullaby. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from your city and what time it is where you are. Whether it's a small town in Idaho or the heart of the Bronx, your perspective matters. And let's go on the journey of today's story together. You duck behind the water tanks. There's no time to pack, no time to run. ICE doesn't knock, they surround. Their chopper dust gets in your teeth. They're rounding up bodies like crates of cabbage, cataloging names you can't spell, demanding documents you never had. And suddenly, a job you worked for pennies has marked you a criminal. You always knew this place wasn't heaven, but you never thought it would be the site of a manhunt. From the outside, it looks like any other stretch of California farmland, flat, sunburned, hard-working. But behind every head of lettuce and crate of cantaloupe is a body that bent too long under the sun, that sent half their paycheck to family thousands of miles away, that memorized a false name just in case this day came. They call this the breadbasket of the world. What they don't call it is what it really is, a legal loophole where undocumented workers feed millions without rights, without protection, without permanence. These aren't criminals, they're labor. They're on your dinner plate. They're the invisible scaffolding that props up your supermarket shelves. You pick strawberries for 10 hours a day. You sleep 5 to a trailer. You share one stove, one leaking faucet, one prayer. Just make it through the season. If the rain holds off, if the truck doesn't break down, if ICE doesn't come. But now the if has arrived. Some of the agents laugh. One even records a selfie in front of the camp. This isn't just enforcement, it's performance. You remember an article from The Guardian last month. Over 80% of ICE raids in agricultural regions yield 0 criminal charges. You remember it because you live it. This isn't about danger, it's about data. Bodies on a spreadsheet, quotas, visuals for press releases. And speaking of visuals, the drone footage on WLWT's immigration report was chilling thermal imaging used to find migrant workers hiding beneath collapsed irrigation pipes. You saw one farmhand's foot sticking out from under a plywood board. They didn't blur it. You wonder if his family saw that on Facebook before they got the call. But here on the ground, there are no stats, no blur, just hands raised in surrender. Just the muffled cries of children not sure if their mom is being arrested or kidnapped. And tomorrow, America will still eat, never wondering who didn't get to go home that night. Elena was supposed to make breakfast that morning. Just beans and rice, maybe half an avocado if her shift went long the day before. Her 7-year-old son, Mateo, had asked if they could splurge on tortillas from the panaderia. She told him maybe next week after payday. That night, she tucked him in, double-knotted his sneakers for school, and promised to wake him early with warm food. She never got the chance. By 6:15 a.m., Elena was in the field, hair tied back, hands wrapped in thin gardening gloves with the fingers cut off. That's when the helicopter started. Someone shouted. She looked up, saw the ICE logo on the agent's tactical vests, and dropped her crate of zucchini. She tried to run. She didn't make it past the next row. They zip-tied her wrists so tight her knuckles bruised. One officer told her, "You'll see your son after processing," but couldn't tell her where they were taking her. Another refused to let her call the babysitter. Mateo waited, alone in their trailer until noon. Then 1 p.m., then 4. A neighbor finally took him in. That night, Mateo curled up on Elena's side of the bed. The pot of beans sat cold on the stove. He thought maybe she'd been in an accident. He didn't know she was in a van, hooded with a thermal blanket, sitting between strangers who were also somebody's mother. Elena's story didn't make the headlines, but her name appears in a TRAC immigration database. Fresno County, female, non-criminal, held pending removal. That's all the country will remember of her if anyone ever looks. Meanwhile, on ICE's own newsroom, a press release titled Operation Harvest Sweep Nets 42 Arrests went live within 24 hours. No names, no faces, just numbers. The photos show rows of agents and stacks of confiscated items, half of them lunch pails and rubber boots. There was a line in that post that stuck with you: public safety is our priority. But Elena was never a danger. She was breakfast, she was comfort, she was routine. And ICE turned her into a case number before her son even noticed. TRAC's data doesn't lie. It just doesn't scream. Buried in reports and dashboards that few people ever read are numbers that map the story ICE doesn't tell. Of the 142,750 immigration arrests made in the last fiscal year, over 61% had no prior criminal convictions. And within agricultural counties across California's Central Valley, nearly 75% of all ICE detentions came from random workplace sweeps, not targeted investigations. You scan the charts and the words blur: non-criminal apprehension, administrative hold, status violation. It all means the same thing, people like Elena. In one particularly stark case uncovered by the Marshall Project, ICE conducted a multi-day sweep of Tulare County and detained 28 individuals, none of whom had any record beyond unpaid traffic tickets. They weren't hiding. They weren't running. They were doing what they'd done every season for years: farming. Their only crime, showing up to work. Then there's the machinery behind it. In a 2024 Security Tech expose by Wired, leaked documents revealed that ICE had contracted private drone services to monitor suspected immigration-dense work sites. You read that phrase again: immigration-dense, not criminally active, not under investigation, just full of people who look undocumented. In other words, full of people who feed America. Even ICE's public statements try to spin these raids as benevolent. On a May update the agency described a Central Valley operation as a compliance enforcement event. You click through, expecting law enforcement language. Instead, you find phrases like community stabilization and targeted deterrent action. It's linguistic fog, and it hides the very real chokehold these raids have on the people we depend on to eat. Meanwhile, the crops go unharvested. In Merced County, 27% of strawberry rows were abandoned after last spring's sweep. The LA Times ran a side column story on the labor loss, but never mentioned the names of the detained. Nobody ever does. And here's the kicker: ICE's internal performance metrics, according to a FOIA request made public by ACLU, still reward apprehension volume as a success indicator. Not crime prevention, not safety metrics. Volume, like it's a sales department. You close your laptop and realize, if Elena's just one data point, how many others never even make the map? You can almost hear the counter-argument before it's spoken, but they broke the law. It's the refrain played over cable news chyrons, shouted on social media, whispered in neighborhood meetings when someone dares to question ICE's methods. It's clean, simple, unquestionable. Law equals order. Violation equals consequence. But what if the law was designed to be broken by those who keep everything running? Take a moment to consider this. Elena, like thousands of others, works in a sector that not only depends on undocumented labor, but quietly encourages it. As the Migration Policy Institute noted in a recent study, over 50% of U.S. crop workers are unauthorized, and yet no comprehensive reform has been passed in decades. Employers profit from it. Grocery stores stock it. You consume it. Now tell me, if the economy feeds off the undocumented, do they not deserve protection too? On the flip side, defenders of ICE will point to legal integrity, claiming that if we excuse unauthorized entry, we erode national sovereignty. They cite overburdened systems, clogged courts, and a flood of migrants. They'll remind you of the rare cases where undocumented individuals did commit crimes, though data from TRAC shows these are far less common than the media implies. It's an emotional argument, not a numerical one. But emotions, after all, are powerful. Still, when 3-year-olds are separated from their mothers over a civil infraction, you have to ask, does proportionality not matter? Then there's the moral geometry. If a man from Honduras risks drowning to pick lettuce that feeds your family, who owes whom? If a woman like Elena pays taxes under an ITIN, raises a child who becomes a school valedictorian, and disappears in the middle of harvest season, who really broke faith? One ICE supervisor, quoted in The Independent, said anonymously, "We enforce the law, not morality." But the raids themselves tell a different story, one soaked in judgment, fear, and a kind of vengeance that feels deeply personal. At some point, you realize this isn't about borders. It's about who gets to belong and who can be erased without question. You come back a week later. The fields are quiet now, too quiet. The tractor's still there, but it hasn't moved. The air smells like drying earth and spoiled onions. You see a lunchbox still half buried in the soil, its zipper broken, a plastic spoon sticking out like a white flag. And you understand this wasn't just a raid. It was a rupture. The local economy bleeds first. Grocery stores lose customers. Churches go dark. Schools report rising absences. In one nearby elementary, over 30 students missed class the day after the ICE raid. The counselor told the Fresno Bee she had never seen so many empty chairs. They didn't just lose parents, she said. They lost trust. And trust, once gone, does not replant itself with the next crop cycle. Then come the farmers. On a Central Valley forum, one posted anonymously, "We lost 40% of our crew overnight. We're going to miss the season. No insurance covers that." No news outlet picks up his story, but it's repeated quietly across counties. Farmers unable to find legal replacements for the same wages. The harvest rots. The economy limps. But the deepest scars run underground. Children stop speaking in class. A local food pantry sees a spike in visitors, mothers now afraid to go anywhere alone. A pastor from a rural Mennonite church reports fewer parishioners. Not because they lost faith, he says, but because faith doesn't stop ICE at the door. Even public services aren't spared. According to a 2024 report by the ACLU, farm worker communities become ghost zones after raids, ambulance calls drop, domestic violence goes unreported, and clinics see fewer patients. Fear suffocates the very systems meant to support life. And then there's Mateo. He doesn't cry much, not anymore. But at night he draws pictures of helicopters, of handcuffs, of a woman in a pink apron holding a ladle. His foster parent shares one with a social worker who tucks it away in a folder marked trauma response. She doesn't know what to do with it. No one does. Because how do you rebuild something that was never considered whole in the first place? You're driving past the produce aisle now, and something feels different. The lettuce is crisp. The apples shine like lacquer. But you can't look at them the same way anymore. Not since you saw the soil where they came from. Not since you heard the cries of people treated like contraband instead of human. You realize this entire system runs on the silence of people like you, people who've never picked a crop, but who benefit from those who do. And that silence isn't neutral. It's the soft blanket over someone else's scream. When ICE raids happen and no one blinks, that's not just apathy, that's complicity. So you start asking questions. Did you know the average undocumented farm worker pays into Social Security but can't claim benefits? That they contribute roughly $12 billion a year to the system they're barred from? Migration Policy Institute published that in a 2023 brief, but it didn't trend on Twitter because numbers don't go viral, faces do. Tears do. The sound of a child whispering, "Will they take me too?" does. And yet, your neighbor doesn't know. Your coworkers don't ask. Even the local news skips over it. Because once you know, you have to care. And once you care, you have to choose a side. You think about Mateo. You think about the red rubber boots left behind in the field. You think about the ICE agent smirking into a phone camera, framing a raid as content. You remember the New York Post headline that read, "ICE cracks down on illegal farm squatters." Squatters? These people weren't hiding in homes they didn't own. They were harvesting the food you eat, with permits from the very farms that now deny knowing them. It all folds back into itself: legality without justice, labor without dignity, lives without record. And still you eat. We all eat. We benefit, day after day, from the brutal clarity that someone else suffers so we don't have to. You weren't there when they came, but you know now. And knowing brings its own weight. The only question left is, what will you do with it? You don't need to be in the field to make a difference. You don't need to speak Spanish or carry a sign or know immigration law. You just need to break the silence, to unlearn the comfort of distance. Because silence is how this keeps happening. And your voice might be the thing that disrupts the algorithm of indifference. So here's what you can do right now. Start local. Is your town a sanctuary city? If not, why? Ask your city council. Ask your school board why they don't have rapid response protocols when ICE shows up at bus stops. Volunteer with legal aid clinics. Many, like Races or United We Dream, run online programs for remote volunteers. They need translators, graphic designers, case researchers, people like you. Share real stories. Don't just repost outrage, elevate testimony. Share Elena's name. Tell Mateo's story. Make it harder for politicians and pundits to flatten these lives into issues. Use TRAC data to back your claims. Tell people that 61% of ICE detentions are non-criminal. Tell them that ICE's own 2025 Q2 bulletin boasts record efficiency without mentioning human cost. And vote. Vote like you live in Mateo's neighborhood. Vote like your mother could be zip-tied and put in a van. Support candidates who push for comprehensive reform, not empty border slogans. Finally, speak up when it's inconvenient, not just when it's trending. Correct your coworker. Push back at the dinner table. Remind your friends that immigration isn't a crisis, it's a consequence of war, of policy, of inequality that we help maintain. Because here's the truth. ICE doesn't need your permission, but it banks on your silence. You have more power than you think. One voice multiplied by thousands becomes the noise that drowns out the helicopter, the chant that breaks through the fog. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be loud, but you do have to act, because silence has never saved anyone, but you just might. You breathe slower now. The sun sets behind the fields you've come to see differently. The same rows of green, but now they shimmer with memory of loss, of work, of people who once bent over those same leaves, whispering prayers under their breath. You picture Elena. Maybe she's still in detention. Maybe she's been deported. Maybe she's walking barefoot down a dusty road, tracing the miles back to her son in her mind. You don't know. That uncertainty becomes its own kind of ache. But not everything ends in silence. You picture Mateo's drawing the pink apron, the ladle, the helicopter. Maybe one day he'll show that drawing to a crowd. Maybe he'll speak into a microphone. Or maybe he'll stay quiet, but raise a daughter who won't be. For now, the air settles. The noise fades. But something in you shifts. You can't unknow this. And maybe that's the beginning. Maybe this time, when you pass the produce aisle, you'll remember their names. Maybe you'll tell someone. Maybe you'll act. Because justice begins in the smallest moments, in knowing, in caring, in choosing not to turn away. So go gently tonight. Rest your eyes. You've seen enough for now. But tomorrow, let your voice be the one they can't ignore.